Picture this: three alien diplomats representing the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, trapped inside what humans casually call a fitness center, screaming for emergency evacuation while a cheerful human in neon shorts tries to explain the benefits of creatine supplementation. This is not a joke. This is not fiction. This is the official incident report that forced the Galactic Council to reclassify humanity from harmless agricultural species to potentially hazardous endurance predators with voluntary self-torture capabilities. The whole catastrophic mess started when Ambassador Quilnox Bravelgrim of the tentacled hegemony made what he thought was a routine observation during a standard diplomatic survey mission. His species, the Globonians, had evolved past the need for physical exertion roughly 12 million years ago, right around the time they'd figured out how to make their morning coffee using pure thought energy. They found physical movement to be roughly as sophisticated as banging rocks together to make fire. These humans, Quilnox noted in his official report, speaking into his crystal recording device while floating 3 feet above the surface of what humans called Earth, seem to gather in large rectangular buildings where they repeatedly lift heavy metallic objects and emit concerning vocal sounds. Initial observations suggest this could represent either an advanced form of military conditioning, a religious ritual involving metallic worship, or possibly the most elaborate torture system ever devised by a sentient species. The Galactic Fitness Investigation Committee, which had been hastily formed after 17 different species filed complaints about disturbing human behavior patterns, decided this warranted immediate investigation. They assembled what they considered their most qualified team of xenoculturalists, anthropologists, and general experts in making sense of inexplicable alien behavior. First was Quilnox himself, whose people had achieved physical perfection through genetic manipulation, and now considered any form of voluntary movement to be either a mechanical malfunction or a cry for help. His tentacles were designed for precise manipulation of quantum interfaces, not whatever bizarre activities humans were engaging in. Second was Dr. Vixabeth Fumbleshire from the Crystalline Collective, whose species had transcended organic bodies entirely about 4 million years ago. They existed as pure energy constructs contained within crystalline matrices, and the concept of physical fitness was roughly equivalent to asking a computer program to do jumping jacks. Dr. Fumbleshire specialized in studying primitive biological behaviors and had written the definitive paper on why organic species do inefficient things. Third was Captain Blorthak Weaselton of the Mechanized Brotherhood, whose people had replaced their biological parts with precision machinery so gradually that they'd forgotten what organic movement felt like. His mechanical body was designed for space construction, deep-sea welding, and quantum engineering, activities that required precision, not whatever chaotic flailing humans seemed to consider recreational. These three representatives of galactic intellectual achievement approached the human facility designated as Iron Paradise Gym and Fitness Emporium with the same scientific methodology they'd used to investigate a potential supernova. They had atmospheric analyzers, gravitational field detectors, 17 different types of protective equipment, and a backup evacuation plan that had been approved by 14 different safety committees. What they didn't have was any understanding of what humans meant by working out. The first indication that this mission might be more complex than anticipated came when they encountered the establishment's proprietor, a human who had introduced himself as Chuck Thunderpex, a name that caused their universal translators to pause for several seconds before reluctantly providing what they admitted was probably not an accurate linguistic interpretation. Dido. Chuck was a human male of approximately 2 meters in height and what could generously be described as industrial construction in width. His arms appeared to have been designed by someone who'd never seen arms before, but had been given a very enthusiastic description of what arms should be capable of accomplishing. His chest was so broad that the aliens initially mistook him for two humans standing very close together. But it was Chuck's enthusiasm that truly marked him as a potentially dangerous life form. When he spotted three obvious alien visitors entering his establishment, his response was not the carefully diplomatic protocol that intergalactic law required, nor the scientific curiosity that first contact situations typically demanded. "Holy protein synthesis!" Chuck bellowed, his voice carrying enough acoustic energy to rattle the crystalline structure of Dr. Fumbleshear's energy matrix. "Alien visitors! This is fantastic! You guys are going to be perfect for my new interspecies fitness program. I can already tell you've got that lean ectomorph build that responds amazing to high-intensity functional training." The three aliens exchanged glances that roughly translated to, "We may have made a significant miscalculation regarding human threat assessment." Quilnox, attempting to maintain diplomatic protocol despite his growing unease, extended one tentacle in what his species considered a formal greeting gesture. "Greetings, human Chuck Thunderpex. We are here on official diplomatic business to observe and document your recreational physical activities. Our preliminary reports suggest this facility serves some kind of training or conditioning purpose." "Training?" Chuck's laugh contained enough enthusiasm to power a small spacecraft for approximately 6 months. "Buddy, you're thinking way too small. This isn't just training, this is transformation. This is about unlocking your genetic potential, maximizing your physiological efficiency, and getting absolutely jacked. Welcome to the most comprehensive fitness experience in this solar system." Dr. Fumbleshear's energy construct flickered through several frequencies of confusion. "Excuse me, human Chuck, but when you say jacked, are you referring to some form of mechanical lifting device? Or is this another example of human linguistic complexity that our translators are struggling to process?" "Oh, you're gonna love this," Chuck replied, apparently interpreting her confusion as eager anticipation. "Getting jacked means building lean muscle mass, increasing functional strength, and achieving peak physical conditioning. It's about becoming the absolute best version of yourself through dedicated training, proper nutrition, and unstoppable determination." Captain Blorthak's mechanical processors ran this information through his logic centers and promptly filed it under incomprehensible human behavior patterns. "Let me verify my understanding," he said, his voice modulated through 17 different mechanical filters. "You voluntarily subject yourselves to physical stress for the purpose of improving your physical capabilities." "Exactly," Chuck beamed, somehow interpreting this as a sign of deep understanding rather than mechanical bewilderment. "You get it. Physical stress creates adaptation. Adaptation creates improvement. Improvement creates results, and results create more motivation for additional physical stress. It's the most beautiful cycle in the known universe." The aliens were beginning to understand that they might have severely underestimated the complexity of human psychology. On most worlds, voluntary physical stress was either a sign of mental illness or a punishment for criminal behavior. The idea that an entire species would engage in it recreationally was revolutionizing their understanding of evolutionary biology. "Now," Chuck continued, rubbing his massive hands together with the enthusiasm of someone about to share the secrets of the universe, "who's ready to start with a comprehensive warm-up routine?" The phrase warm-up routine caused all three aliens to simultaneously access their emergency protocols database. In their experience, any activity that required warming up was typically either highly dangerous or involved industrial machinery. Chuck's interpretation of a warm-up involved what he enthusiastically described as dynamic movement preparation, a series of activities designed to increase core body temperature, enhance joint mobility, and activate the neuromuscular system for optimal performance. The aliens watched in growing horror as Chuck demonstrated movements that seemed to test the structural integrity of every joint in the human body. "We'll start with some arm circles," Chuck explained, beginning to rotate his massive arms in motions that defied several laws of physics the aliens thought they understood. This helps warm up the shoulder girdle and prepares the rotator cuff for resistance training. Quilnox stared at the demonstration with the fascination of someone watching a complex engineering disaster unfold in slow motion. His tentacles were designed for precise quantum manipulation, not whatever Chuck was calling arm circles. His attempts to replicate the movement resulted in what could generously be described as interpretive ocean wave simulation. "Excellent form," Chuck encouraged, apparently having a very different definition of excellent than was used on most worlds. "I can see you're really focusing on the mind-muscle connection. Now let's add some leg swings for hip mobility." The concept of leg swings proved even more challenging for beings whose species had evolved past the need for legs, replaced them with mechanical alternatives, or existed as pure energy. Dr. Fumbleshire's energy construct began cycling through colors that didn't exist on most worlds, as she attempted to manifest temporary leg-like appendages. Captain Blorthak's mechanical legs were designed for precision positioning, not swinging, and his attempts created sounds that suggested several warranty violations. "I think," said Dr. Fumbleshire carefully, her energy matrix now flickering between dimensions, "that our physiological systems may not be optimally designed for these particular movement patterns." "Nonsense!" Chuck replied, with the confidence of someone who'd never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with proper form and adequate protein intake. "Every body is capable of improvement. We just need to find the right modifications and progressions. Let's try some jumping jacks." The phrase jumping jacks entered the alien's consciousness like a linguistic virus designed to cause maximum confusion. Their translators processed the words, cross-referenced them with 17 different databases, and still couldn't determine why humans would want to simultaneously jump and jack anything. Chuck's demonstration of jumping jacks looked like someone had figured out how to make human movement violate the laws of thermodynamics. He moved his arms and legs in coordinated patterns while launching his entire body into the air repeatedly, all while maintaining what he called proper breathing technique and a smile that suggested he was enjoying the experience. "The key," Chuck explained while continuing his demonstration, "is maintaining rhythm, keeping your core engaged, and really feeling the cardiovascular challenge. This is fantastic for elevating heart rate and preparing your system for more intensive training." The aliens watched this display with the same expression humans might reserve for watching someone voluntarily set themselves on fire. Quilnox's tentacles couldn't coordinate the complex movement pattern required for jumping jacks, resulting in what looked like an octopus having an existential crisis. Dr. Fumbleshire's energy construct began cycling through her entire emotional spectrum so rapidly that several gym members stopped their activities to watch what they assumed was an advanced holographic light show. Captain Blorthak's mechanical joints weren't designed for rapid vertical displacement, and his attempts at jumping jacks produced sounds that made Chuck wonder if someone was operating heavy construction equipment in his gym. "This is more complex than our initial assessment suggested," wheezed Quilnox, whose respiratory system was already protesting the increased activity level. On his homeworld, elevated breathing was typically a sign of imminent mechanical failure. "That's the spirit." Chuck interpreted this as encouragement rather than diplomatic concern. "You're already getting into the zone. I can see you're really pushing past your comfort zones. Now that we're properly warmed up, let's hit the cardio section and really get this party started." The phrase, "get this party started," caused all three aliens to simultaneously check their emergency evacuation protocols. In their experience, Humans used the word party to describe events that ranged from pleasant social gatherings to catastrophic explosions. Given their current situation, they suspected Chuck's definition leaned toward the latter. The cardio section of Iron Paradise Gym looked like a museum of human ingenuity dedicated to the concept of movement without destination. There were machines designed to simulate running, climbing, rowing, and cycling, all while remaining in exactly the same location. The aliens stared at this collection of devices with the same bewilderment humans might feel when observing advanced quantum physics. "This," Chuck announced proudly, "is where the magic happens. Cardiovascular conditioning is the foundation of all fitness. These machines allow us to precisely control intensity, duration, and resistance while monitoring biometric feedback in real time." Dr. Fumblesure's energy construct flickered with what her species called analytical confusion. "Excuse me, human Chuck, but I'm having difficulty understanding the logical framework here. You've created machines that simulate activities you could perform outdoors, but you've eliminated the practical benefits of actually traveling to different locations." "Brilliant question," Chuck replied, somehow interpreting this as insight rather than bewilderment. "That's exactly why this is so perfect. By controlling the environment, we can focus purely on the physiological adaptation without any external variables. Plus, we can add features like heart rate monitoring, interval programming, and entertainment systems to optimize the experience." Captain Blorthak's mechanical brain processed this information and filed it under human logic systems that defy computational analysis. "So you've engineered complexity into what could be accomplished through simple locomotion." "Exactly!" Chuck beamed, apparently unaware that this wasn't intended as a compliment. "We've taken basic human movement and optimized it. Now let's get you started on the treadmills." The treadmill, a device that allowed humans to run while remaining stationary, represented everything the aliens found incomprehensible about human civilization. It was simultaneously sophisticated and pointless, technologically advanced and fundamentally unnecessary, efficient and completely wasteful. Chuck began his explanation with the enthusiasm of someone describing the greatest invention in galactic history. "The treadmill is perfect for beginners. You can control your speed, adjust the incline, monitor your heart rate, and even watch entertainment programs while you exercise. It's like running, but better." The aliens stared at the moving belt with the same expression they might reserve for a particularly elaborate practical joke. "And humans choose to use these devices?" asked Dr. Fumblesure. "Choose?" Chuck's laugh could have powered a small space station. "They love them. Some people spend hours on treadmills. It's meditation in motion. It's Zen through cardiovascular challenge. It's the perfect fusion of technology and biology." What followed could only be described as a systematic exploration of the fundamental incompatibilities between alien physiology and human exercise equipment. Chuck started them at what he described as a gentle walking pace, approximately 2.5 miles per hour with zero incline. Quilnox's tentacles couldn't grip the treadmill's moving surface properly, and his attempts to walk resulted in a movement pattern that looked like he was trying to perform synchronized swimming on dry land. The belt kept moving, while Quilnox remained more or less stationary, creating what Chuck generously described as an innovative approach to core stability training. Dr. P. Fumblesure's energy construct could theoretically interface with the treadmill's electronic systems, but the concept of maintaining a consistent physical form while moving at a predetermined speed caused her molecular structure to fluctuate between dimensions. The treadmill's sensors couldn't determine if she was walking, running, or experiencing some kind of quantum tunneling event. Captain Blorthak's mechanical legs were designed for precise positioning in zero-gravity construction environments, not for repetitive locomotion on moving surfaces. His movement pattern was perfectly mechanical, each step identical to the last with mathematical precision, but it produced a rhythmic clanking sound that made everyone in the gym wonder if someone was operating a pile driver. "I think," Captain Blorthak announced after several minutes of mechanical walking, "that my locomotive systems may require recalibration for this type of repetitive surface motion." Recalibration? Chuck's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who'd just discovered a new training methodology. "That's perfect! That's exactly what exercise is, biological recalibration. Your systems are adapting to new movement patterns. This is fantastic progress." The aliens were beginning to realize that Chuck had a remarkable ability to interpret any response as positive reinforcement for continued activity. Protest was encouragement, confusion was enthusiasm, mechanical failure was adaptation. Now that you're getting comfortable with basic locomotion," Chuck announced, apparently oblivious to the fact that none of them were comfortable with anything, "let's increase the intensity. We're going to bump up the speed and add some incline." The phrase "bump up the speed" caused Quilnox's tentacles to reflexively wrap around the treadmill's safety railings. In his experience, anything involving increased speed typically required emergency protocols and safety equipment rated for industrial accidents. Chuck's definition of increased intensity involved raising the treadmill speed to 4.5 miles per hour and adding a 3% incline, modifications that transformed their gentle mechanical torture into what could only be described as accelerated biomechanical chaos. Quilnox's tentacle-gripping strategy collapsed immediately. The increased speed and incline created forces his appendages weren't designed to handle, and he began sliding backward on the belt while making sounds his species typically reserved for mourning the dead. His attempts to maintain forward motion looked like he was trying to climb a waterfall made of rubber. Dr. Fumbleshire's energy construct began fluctuating so rapidly that the gym's electrical system started responding to her distress signals. The lights began pulsing in rhythm with her molecular vibrations. The music system began cycling through frequencies that existed only in theoretical physics, and several electronic devices in the vicinity began displaying error messages in languages that hadn't been invented yet. Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems were handling the increased speed and incline with typical mechanical efficiency, but the additional stress was causing his joints to produce sounds that suggested his warranty was not only expired, but had been violated in 17 different ways. His movements remained perfectly precise, but he was now generating enough acoustic energy to serve as an impromptu percussion section for the gym's music system. "Excellent!" Chuck shouted over the cacophony of tentacle slapping, energy crackling, and mechanical grinding. "You're really pushing through the resistance. I can see you're finding your limits and breaking through them." The concept of breaking through limits took on an ominous significance when applied to alien physiology. Quilnox was indeed breaking through his limits, specifically the limits of tentacle adhesion to synthetic surfaces. Dr. Fumbleshire was exploring limits that existed in theoretical physics rather than practical biology. Captain Blorthak was discovering the limits of mechanical joint tolerance under repetitive stress conditions. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Fumbleshire, her voice now modulated through 17 different frequency spectrums, "we should explore some of the other equipment options." "Outstanding idea," Chuck replied, interpreting this as eagerness rather than desperation. "Let's move to the strength training section. That's where the real magic happens." The strength training section of Iron Paradise Gym looked like a medieval torture chamber that had been redesigned by someone with an engineering degree and an unlimited budget for metal fabrication. There were machines with names like leg press, chest fly, lat pull down, and seated row, all of which sounded like military operations rather than recreational activities. "This," Chuck announced proudly, "is where we build real strength. Functional, practical, usable strength that translates to every aspect of life. These machines allow us to isolate specific muscle groups while maintaining proper form and progressive overload." The aliens stared at the collection of metal, cables, and weight plates with growing comprehension that they'd wandered into something far more complex than they'd anticipated. Each machine looked like it had been designed to test the structural limits of human biology. "Let's start with something basic," Chuck said, leading them to a device that looked like a chair connected to a complex lever system loaded with metal plates. "This is the leg press. It's perfect for building lower body strength. We'll start light, just body weight resistance." The concept of body weight resistance seemed reasonable until Chuck explained that it involved pressing their own body weight using only their legs while lying on an angled platform. For beings whose species had evolved past the need for significant leg strength, replaced their legs with mechanical alternatives, or didn't technically have legs in any traditional sense, this presented unique challenges. Chuck's demonstration involved positioning himself on the machine and pressing what appeared to be several hundred pounds of metal plates using only his legs, all while maintaining what he called controlled breathing and a conversational tone that suggested this was roughly as challenging as tying his shoes. "The key is maintaining proper form," Chuck explained, while effortlessly moving weight that could have been used as ship ballast. "Keep your core engaged, control the negative portion of the movement, and really focus on the mind-muscle connection. Feel those quads working." The aliens had no idea what quads were, but they suspected they didn't have them. Quilnox's tentacles weren't designed for generating force in the directions the leg press required. Dr. Fumbleshore's energy construct could theoretically exert pressure, but the concept of engaging her core was roughly equivalent to asking a rainbow to lift weights. Captain Blorthak's mechanical legs could generate precise amounts of force, but they were calibrated for space construction, not whatever Chuck was calling functional strength training. "Your turn," Chuck announced with the enthusiasm of someone sharing the secrets of the universe. What followed was a systematic exploration of the fundamental differences between alien physiology and human exercise equipment. Quilnox positioned his tentacles against the leg press platform and attempted to generate the pressing motion Chuck had demonstrated. His appendages could manipulate quantum interfaces with precision, but they couldn't coordinate the type of force generation required for leg pressing. His efforts resulted in what looked like he was trying to massage the machine rather than move it. "Excellent mind-muscle connection," Chuck encouraged, apparently seeing something the aliens couldn't detect. "I can tell you're really focusing on the muscle recruitment patterns. Let's try a lighter weight." Dr. Fumbleshore's attempt at leg pressing involved manifesting temporary solid appendages from her energy construct and attempting to interface with the machine. The result was a light show that would have been impressive at a concert, but didn't involve any actual weight movement. Her energy matrix began cycling through colors that existed only in theoretical physics, as she tried to understand how to apply force while maintaining molecular cohesion. "Fantastic!" Chuck shouted, somehow interpreting the psychedelic light display as successful exercise execution. "I've never seen anyone approach leg pressing from an energy manipulation perspective. You're really thinking outside the box." Captain Blorthak's mechanical legs were the most successful at interfacing with the leg press, but his precision engineering systems weren't designed for the variable resistance and range of motion required. His legs moved the weight with perfect mechanical efficiency, but the movement pattern was so rigid and precise that it looked more like a manufacturing process than exercise. The rhythmic mechanical sound suggested he was assembling spacecraft components rather than training his muscles. "Perfect form," Chuck declared, oblivious to the fact that Captain Blorthak was treating the leg press like a precision engineering task. "Your technique is absolutely flawless." You've got that controlled, deliberate approach that really maximizes the training stimulus. After 20 minutes of what Chuck called getting familiar with the movement patterns, he decided they were ready for the real fun, which involved adding what he described as a challenging but manageable training load. The phrase, challenging but manageable, sent collective shivers through the three aliens. In their experience, human definitions of manageable typically required emergency medical protocols and structural engineering evaluations. Chuck began loading metal plates onto the leg press with the casual efficiency of someone who'd never encountered a weight that was too heavy. "We'll start with a nice round number," he announced, adding plates that collectively weighed more than most of the aliens' entire bodies. "How about we try 225 pounds? That's a great starting point for building functional leg strength." The aliens stared at the loaded machine with the same expression humans might reserve for a particularly elaborate suicide device. 225 pounds of metal plates didn't look like a starting point for anything except industrial machinery testing. "Who wants to go first?" Chuck asked with the enthusiasm of someone offering tickets to the best show in the galaxy. The collective silence that followed this question was so profound that it achieved what physicists call quantum quietness, a state where the absence of sound becomes a measurable force in its own right. "I'll go first," Chuck announced, apparently interpreting their stunned silence as polite deference. "I'll show you the proper technique, then you can give it a try." Chuck's demonstration with 225 pounds was a masterpiece of human biomechanical efficiency. He positioned himself on the machine, grabbed the handles, and began pressing the weight with movements that looked effortless, despite involving forces that could crush most alien species. He completed what he called a light set of 12 repetitions while maintaining casual conversation about proper breathing techniques and the importance of progressive overload. "See how I'm controlling the eccentric portion," Chuck explained while pressing weight that could have been used as a small building foundation. "That's where the real muscle building happens. The negative portion of the movement creates micro-trauma that stimulates adaptation." The phrase, micro-trauma that stimulates adaptation, caused all three aliens to simultaneously activate their medical monitoring systems. In their cultures, micro-trauma was typically treated with emergency medical intervention, not considered a desirable training outcome. "Now," Chuck said, finishing his demonstration and stepping away from the machine, "who's ready to try?" The aliens looked at the 225 pounds of metal plates with expressions that roughly translated to, "We are observing our own deaths in slow motion." "Perhaps," suggested Quilnox diplomatically, "we could start with a somewhat lighter weight? Our species may require different loading parameters than humans." "Absolutely," Chuck replied, somehow interpreting this as enthusiasm rather than terror. "Everyone's different. Let's remove some weight and find your starting point." Chuck began removing plates with the casual efficiency of someone who considered 225 pounds to be excessive weight for beginners. He removed one plate, then another, then several more, until the machine was loaded with what he described as just a light training weight. The light training weight was still approximately 135 pounds, roughly equivalent to the body weight of most organic species in the galaxy. The aliens stared at this reduced load, with the growing realization that human definitions of light existed in a completely different mathematical framework than the rest of the universe. "Perfect," Chuck announced. 135 pounds is a great starting weight. It's challenging enough to provide a training stimulus, but manageable enough for learning proper form. Quilnox approached the leg press with the same careful deliberation humans might use when approaching an unexploded explosive device. His tentacles weren't designed for generating the type of coordinated force required, but he gamely attempted to position himself on the machine and interface with the weight. His first attempt at pressing 135 pounds resulted in what could generously be described as biological systems reaching their operational limits. His tentacles could manipulate quantum interfaces with precision, but they couldn't coordinate the type of force generation required for moving metal plates. The weight didn't move, but Quilnox made sounds that suggested several of his internal systems were filing complaints with his consciousness. "Excellent!" Chuck shouted, apparently seeing progress where the aliens detected only suffering. "I can see you're really engaging those stabilizer muscles. The isometric hold is a fantastic way to build foundational strength." The phrase isometric hold was Chuck's positive interpretation of complete inability to move the weight. Quilnox's tentacles were indeed holding the weight in a fixed position, but only because they lacked the capability to move it in any direction. Dr. Fumbleshear's attempt at leg pressing involved manifesting temporary solid appendages and attempting to apply force through her energy construct. The result was a spectacular light show as her molecular structure fluctuated between dimensions while trying to interface with solid matter. The weight plates began glowing with residual energy. The machine's metal framework became temporarily magnetic, and several electronic devices in the vicinity began displaying error messages in theoretical languages. "Incredible," Chuck declared, apparently witnessing something completely different from what was actually happening. "I've never seen anyone approach resistance training from a quantum energy perspective. You're really revolutionizing my understanding of biomechanics." Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems were the most successful at interfacing with the leg press, but the weight exceeded his system's design parameters for repetitive loading. His first attempt resulted in a movement that was mechanically perfect, but produced sounds that suggested several warranty violations and possible insurance claims. "Flawless technique," Chuck announced, oblivious to the mechanical distress signals. "Your form is absolutely perfect. You've got that controlled mechanical precision that really maximizes the training effect." After an hour of what Chuck enthusiastically called learning the movement patterns, the aliens had achieved what could generously be described as survival. They hadn't successfully completed any repetitions in the traditional sense, but they had interfaced with the equipment without causing structural damage to themselves or the gym. "Outstanding work," Chuck declared, reviewing their progress with the satisfaction of someone who just witnessed a breakthrough in interspecies athletics. "You guys are really getting the hang of this. I can see you're developing that mind-muscle connection that's so important for effective training." The aliens weren't sure what Chuck was seeing, but they were fairly certain it wasn't progress in any conventional sense. However, they were beginning to understand that Chuck operated in a reality where any interaction with exercise equipment constituted success. "Now that you've mastered the leg press," Chuck announced, "let's move on to upper body training. I've got the perfect exercise for building functional pushing strength." The phrase functional pushing strength caused all three aliens to check their emergency evacuation protocols. Their experience with Chuck's definitions suggested that functional was code for potentially life-threatening. Indeed, Chuck led them to what he described as the bench press, a device that looked like a bed that had been weaponized by an engineer with a grudge against relaxation. It consisted of a horizontal bench positioned beneath a rack, holding a long metal bar, with the option to add various amounts of weight plates. "The bench press," Chuck explained, with the reverence of someone describing a religious artifact, "is the king of upper body exercises. It builds functional pushing strength, develops the chest, shoulders, and triceps, and it's a fantastic measure of overall upper body power." The aliens stared at the bench press with growing horror. The concept of lying on one's back and pressing weight directly upward struck them as fundamentally contrary to basic survival instincts. In most civilizations, lying on one's back was the position you assumed when you'd given up on life. "The beauty of the bench press," Chuck continued, "is its simplicity. You lie down, grab the bar, lower it to your chest, and press it back up. It's basic human biomechanics optimized for strength development." Dr. Fumble's energy construct flickered through several frequencies of concern. "Excuse me, human Chuck, but what happens if the weight falls?" "Excellent question," Chuck replied, somehow interpreting this as scientific curiosity rather than survival instinct. "That's what spotters are for. A spotter stands behind the bench and assists if you reach muscular failure. It's a beautiful example of human cooperation in pursuit of physical excellence." The concept of reaching muscular failure sent alarm signals through all three aliens' medical monitoring systems. In their cultures, muscular failure was typically followed by emergency medical intervention, not considered a training goal. "Don't worry," Chuck assured them. "I'll be your spotter. I've got thousands of hours of spotting experience. Plus, we'll start with just the empty bar. That's only 45 pounds. The empty bar, 45 pounds of solid steel, looked roughly equivalent to a piece of construction equipment. The aliens stared at it with the same expression humans might reserve for a particularly venomous snake. Chuck's demonstration of proper bench press technique involved lying on the bench, positioning his hands on the bar, lowering it to his chest, and pressing it back to arm's length with movements that looked effortless, despite involving forces that could crush most alien species. He completed what he called a light warm-up set, while explaining breathing patterns, grip width, and the importance of maintaining a slight arch in the back. "See how I'm controlling the descent?" Chuck explained, while manipulating 45 pounds of steel like it was made of air. "The eccentric portion is just as important as the concentric. That's where you really build strength and muscle mass." The aliens were beginning to understand that human strength capabilities existed in a completely different framework than the rest of the galaxy. Chuck was casually manipulating weights that would require industrial equipment on most worlds. "All right," Chuck announced, completing his demonstration. "Who wants to try first?" The collective silence that followed this question achieved what acoustics engineers call negative sound. A quietness so profound that it began absorbing ambient noise from other parts of the gym. Quillnox approached the bench with the careful deliberation of someone approaching a known hazard. His tentacles weren't designed for gripping horizontal bars or generating upward force while in a prone position, but he gamely attempted to position himself on the bench. His attempt to interface with the 45-pound bar resulted in what could generously be described as creative problem-solving. His tentacles could wrap around the bar, but they couldn't coordinate the type of pressing motion Chuck had demonstrated. His efforts looked more like he was trying to give the bar a very enthusiastic hug. "Fantastic!" Chuck encouraged, apparently witnessing something completely different from what was actually happening. "I can see you're really focusing on that mind-muscle connection. The isometric hold is building fantastic foundational strength." Dr. Fumble's attempt at bench pressing involved manifesting temporary solid appendages and attempting to apply upward force through her energy construct. The result was another spectacular light show, as her molecular structure tried to interface with the concept of lying down and pressing upward simultaneously. The bar began glowing with residual energy, and several gym members stopped their workouts to watch what they assumed was an advanced holographic display. "Revolutionary," Chuck declared. "I've never seen anyone approach bench pressing from a quantum mechanics perspective. You're really expanding my understanding of biomechanical possibilities." Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems could theoretically interface with the bench press, but his body wasn't designed for horizontal positioning. His attempts to lie on the bench resulted in a configuration that looked more like advanced machinery maintenance than exercise. When he attempted to press the bar, his mechanical arms moved with perfect precision, but the sounds suggested several systems operating outside their design parameters. "Perfect form," Chuck announced, somehow interpreting the mechanical distress signals as successful exercise execution. "Your technique is absolutely flawless. You've got that controlled robotic precision that really maximizes the training stimulus." After another hour of what Chuck optimistically called mastering the fundamentals, the aliens had achieved a new understanding of human recreational activities. They hadn't successfully completed any bench press repetitions in the traditional sense, but they had survived direct contact with what humans considered lightweights. "Incredible progress," Chuck declared, reviewing their efforts with obvious satisfaction. "You guys are really developing those neural pathways. I can see you're starting to understand the mind-muscle connection that's so crucial for effective training." The aliens were starting to understand something, but it wasn't mind-muscle connection. They were beginning to realize that humans had somehow weaponized self-improvement and convinced themselves it was recreational. "Now," Chuck announced with the enthusiasm of someone about to share the greatest secrets of the universe, "let's move on to what I like to call the fun stuff, free weights." The phrase "fun stuff" caused all three aliens to simultaneously activate their emergency beacons. Their experience with Chuck's definitions of fun suggested this was code for catastrophic escalation of current situation. The free weights section looked like an armory designed by someone who'd never encountered actual weapons, but had been given a very detailed description of what dangerous metal objects should look like. There were dumbbells ranging from what Chuck described as light warm-up weights to objects that looked like they could be used as ballast for spacecraft. "Free weights," Chuck explained with obvious reverence, "are where the real magic happens. Unlike machines, free weights require total body coordination, stabilizer muscle activation, and functional movement patterns that translate directly to real-world activities." The aliens stared at the collection of metal objects with growing comprehension that they'd entered the most dangerous phase of their cultural investigation. The dumbbells alone ranged from what Chuck called 5-pound starter weights to objects that looked like they could be used to anchor space stations. "The beauty of free weights," Chuck continued, selecting what appeared to be a moderately sized dumbbell, "is their versatility. With just a pair of dumbbells, you can work every muscle group in the human body. Watch this." Chuck's demonstration of basic dumbbell movements involved manipulating two 25-pound weights with the casual efficiency of someone who'd never encountered the concept of too heavy. He performed movements he called bicep curls, shoulder presses, and chest flies, all while maintaining conversational tone and explaining the biomechanical advantages of each exercise. "See how the free weights force your stabilizer muscles to work?" Chuck explained, while pressing 50 pounds of metal over his head like it was made of helium. "That's functional strength development that you can't get from machines. This translates to everything: carrying groceries, moving furniture, everyday activities." The aliens were beginning to understand that humans had somehow evolved to the point where carrying groceries and moving furniture required the same strength capabilities needed for industrial construction on most worlds. "Now," Chuck announced, "let's start you off with some light dumbbells. We'll begin with 5-pound weights, perfect for learning proper form and movement patterns." 5-pound dumbbells shouldn't have been intimidating to representatives of advanced spacefaring civilizations, but 5 pounds of metal that had to be lifted repeatedly in specific patterns while maintaining what Chuck called proper form was an entirely different challenge. Quilnox approached the 5-pound dumbbells with the same careful consideration humans might use when handling radioactive materials. His tentacles could manipulate quantum interfaces with precision, but they weren't designed for gripping small metal objects and moving them in predetermined patterns. His first attempt at what Chuck called bicep curls resulted in a movement pattern that looked more like tentacle-based interpretive dance than strength training. His appendages could wrap around the dumbbells, but coordinating the curling motion while maintaining proper form created what Chuck generously described as a unique approach to muscle recruitment. "Excellent," Chuck encouraged, apparently seeing successful exercise execution where the aliens detected only chaos. I can see you're really focusing on that eccentric control. The slow, deliberate movement is perfect for building strength endurance. Doctor. Fumblesha's attempt at dumbbell exercises involved manifesting temporary solid appendages and attempting to interface with the concept of gripping and lifting simultaneously. Her energy construct began fluctuating between dimensions as she tried to maintain molecular cohesion while applying force to solid objects. The dumbbells began glowing with residual energy, and her attempts at bicep curls created what looked like a laser light show choreographed to the rhythm of resistance training. "Revolutionary," Chuck declared, somehow interpreting the quantum light display as advanced exercise technique. "I've never seen anyone approach dumbbell training from an energy manipulation perspective. You're really pushing the boundaries of what I thought was possible." Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems were the most successful at interfacing with the dumbbells, but his precision engineering wasn't designed for the variable resistance and range of motion required. His attempts at bicep curls were mechanically perfect, each repetition identical to the last, with mathematical precision, but the movements were so rigid that they looked more like industrial assembly processes than biological training. "Flawless technique," Chuck announced, oblivious to the fact that Captain Blorthak was treating dumbbell exercises like precision manufacturing tasks. "Your form is absolutely perfect. You've got that controlled mechanical approach that really maximizes the training stimulus." After what Chuck optimistically called mastering the basics, he decided they were ready for compound movements, exercises that worked multiple muscle groups simultaneously for maximum efficiency and functional development. The phrase compound movements caused all three aliens to check their structural integrity monitoring systems. Their experience with Chuck's escalating training protocols suggested that compound was code for exponentially more complex and potentially hazardous. Chuck introduced them to something called squats, an exercise that involved lowering the body into a sitting position and then standing back up, all while holding weights and maintaining what he described as perfect postural alignment. "The squats," Chuck explained with the reverence typically reserved for describing fundamental laws of physics, "are the king of all exercises. They work the quadriceps, glutes, hamstrings, core, and stabilizer muscles all at the same time. They're functional movement at its finest." Chuck's demonstration of proper squat technique looked like someone had figured out how to make standing up and sitting down violate several laws of biomechanics. He held dumbbells while lowering his body into positions that seemed to test the structural limits of human joint architecture, all while maintaining perfect balance and explaining breathing patterns. "The key is maintaining proper hip hinge mechanics," Chuck explained, while performing what looked like controlled falls that somehow ended in successful recoveries. "Keep your chest up, knees tracking over your toes, and really focus on pushing through your heels on the ascent." The aliens watched this demonstration with the fascination of beings observing a completely alien form of physics. The idea that humans could voluntarily place themselves in mechanically disadvantageous positions and then recover using only muscle power was revolutionizing their understanding of biological capabilities. "Your turn," Chuck announced, with obvious enthusiasm. Will Knox's attempt at squatting resulted in what could generously be described as creative interpretation of vertical movement. His tentacles weren't designed for supporting his body weight in the positions Chuck had demonstrated, and his attempts to lower into a sitting position looked more like controlled collapse followed by desperate recovery efforts. "Fantastic," Chuck encouraged, apparently witnessing successful exercise execution where the aliens detected only survival instincts. "I can see you're really working on that mobility. The deep squat position is excellent for hip flexibility." Dr. Fumbleshire's energy construct began cycling through configurations that existed only in theoretical physics as she attempted to understand the concept of squatting while maintaining molecular cohesion. Her attempts created light patterns that would have been impressive at a scientific conference, but didn't involve any actual vertical movement. "Incredible," Chuck declared, interpreting the quantum light show as advanced biomechanical efficiency. "I've never seen anyone approach squat mechanics from a dimensional flux perspective. You're really revolutionizing my understanding of movement science." Captain Blorthak's mechanical legs could theoretically perform the squatting motion, but his systems weren't designed for the dynamic loading and unloading required. His attempts were mechanically precise, but produced sounds that suggested several components operating outside their warranty parameters. "Perfect form," Chuck announced, somehow interpreting the mechanical distress signals as successful exercise execution. "Your technique is absolutely flawless. You've got that controlled, robotic precision that really optimizes the training effect." Just when the aliens thought they'd reached the peak of Chuck's training methodology, he announced what he called the ultimate challenge, something he described as functional fitness integration. "Now that you've mastered the individual movement patterns," Chuck explained, apparently having a very different definition of mastered than was used on most worlds, "it's time to combine them into what we call circuit training, a comprehensive approach that challenges cardiovascular endurance, muscular strength, and functional movement all at the same time." The phrase circuit training sent collective shivers through the three aliens' emergency monitoring systems. Their experience with Chuck's escalating protocols suggested that combining all their previous activities into a single circuit was roughly equivalent to voluntary participation in a natural disaster. Chuck's explanation of circuit training involved moving between different exercise stations, performing specific movements for predetermined time periods with minimal rest between activities. "It's like interval training," he explained, "but with resistance exercises. It's the perfect way to maximize training efficiency." The circuit Chuck designed for his interspecies fitness integration program included modified versions of all the exercises they'd attempted, arranged in what he called a logical progression that challenges different energy systems and movement patterns. "We'll start with a simple circuit," Chuck announced, somehow managing to make simple sound ominous. 3 minutes at each station, 30 seconds rest between exercises, and we'll complete 3 full rounds. It's going to be amazing." The aliens stared at Chuck's circuit design with expressions that roughly translated to, "We are witnessing the systematic documentation of our own demise." Station 1 was treadmill walking, which the aliens had already established was incompatible with their basic physiology. Station 2 was modified leg pressing, an activity that had previously resulted in what Chuck called isometric holds, but the aliens recognized as complete inability to move metal objects. Station 3 was dumbbell exercises, movements that had transformed their appendages into what looked like malfunctioning industrial equipment. "Ready?" Chuck asked, with the enthusiasm of someone about to witness the greatest show in the galaxy. What followed could only be described as a systematic exploration of the absolute limits of alien endurance, human optimism, and the fundamental laws of physics. The aliens attempted to complete Chuck's circuit with the same determination that had carried their species to the stars, but the gap between their evolutionary capabilities and human recreational standards proved insurmountable. Quilnox's tentacles achieved what his species would later describe as transcendent exhaustion, a state where physical systems acknowledge their absolute limits while consciousness observes the process with detached fascination. Dr. Fumbleshire's energy construct began cycling through frequencies that existed only in emergency medical databases, creating light patterns that suggested her molecular structure was filing formal complaints with the laws of physics. Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems began producing harmonious metallic sounds that suggested several components were collaborating to create what could generously be called mechanical music. "Outstanding!" Chuck declared, apparently witnessing something completely different from what was actually happening. "I can see you're really pushing through those barriers. This is where the real transformation happens." It was at this point that all three aliens simultaneously achieved what exercise physiologists would later classify as voluntary system shutdown, a state where biological and mechanical systems collectively decide that continued operation requires immediate external intervention. Quilnox's tentacles stopped responding to conscious control and began what his species called automatic preservation coiling, a defensive posture typically assumed during life-threatening emergencies. Dr. Fumbleshire's energy construct achieved what theoretical physicists describe as controlled molecular dispersal, a state where energy beings maintain consciousness while allowing their physical manifestation to distribute across multiple dimensions. Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems activated what his manufacturers called emergency preservation mode, a state where all non-essential functions shut down to preserve core operational capability. "This is perfect," Chuck announced, apparently interpreting their collective system failures as successful completion of his training program. "You guys have really found your limits and pushed beyond them. This is exactly what functional fitness is all about." It was at this precise moment that the gym's emergency alarm system detected what it classified as multiple simultaneous medical emergencies and automatically contacted what humans called emergency services. Yadim, the arrival of paramedics, firefighters, and what appeared to be a hazardous materials team created what Chuck described as an exciting learning opportunity about human emergency response protocols. The emergency responders' attempts to provide medical assistance to three alien beings in various states of exercise-induced system failure created what could generously be described as cross-species medical chaos. Mahi, the paramedics' equipment couldn't interface with Quilnox's tentacle-based physiology. Dr. Fumbleshire's energy construct was causing their electronic devices to malfunction, and Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems were producing diagnostic codes that existed in 17 different alien languages. "They're fine," Chuck assured the emergency responders, apparently having a very different definition of fine than was used in medical contexts. "They just pushed through their comfort zones. This is totally normal for first-time fitness enthusiasts." The emergency responders' expressions suggested that Chuck's definition of normal existed in a completely different medical framework than the rest of the known universe. It was during this medical chaos that the aliens' emergency beacons finally reached the Galactic Council's emergency response systems. The Council's rescue fleet, led by Admiral Groxanth Bumblethorpe, arrived to find Earth's orbital space filled with what appeared to be a full-scale medical emergency involving three of their most experienced diplomats. "By the 17 moons of Centauri," Admiral Bumblethorpe whispered, reviewing the initial situation reports, "what kind of torture facility did they encounter?" The rescue team's attempts to locate their missing diplomats were complicated by the fact that the gym was now swarming with human emergency responders, all of whom seemed convinced that the aliens required immediate medical intervention for something called exercise-induced exhaustion. "Exercise-induced exhaustion!" Admiral Bumblethorpe repeated the phrase with growing alarm. "Are you telling me that humans have created a form of recreational exhaustion?" The rescue team found their diplomats in what humans called the recovery position, lying on mats while Chuck explained the importance of proper hydration, electrolyte replacement, and something he called post-workout nutrition optimization. "Don't worry," Chuck assured the rescue team, apparently interpreting their arrival as additional fitness enthusiasts. "Your friends just experienced what we call hitting the wall. It's a totally normal part of the training process. They'll be back to baseline in a few hours, and tomorrow they'll be ready for progressive overload. The phrase progressive overload caused the entire rescue team to simultaneously reach for their emergency sedatives. In their experience, anything involving progressive and overload typically required industrial safety protocols and structural engineering evaluations. Perhaps, suggested Admiral Bumblethorpe diplomatically, we should allow our colleagues to recover on our medical facilities before any additional training. Medical facilities? Chuck's expression suggested this was a completely foreign concept. They don't need medical attention, they need protein and proper hydration, and maybe some light stretching to prevent stiffness. The mention of protein caused Dr. Fumbleshare's energy construct to flicker with what her species called anticipatory molecular terror. During their gym experience, Chuck had mentioned protein approximately 73 times, always with the enthusiasm of someone describing a miraculous cure for all known ailments. "What exactly is this protein you keep mentioning?" Admiral Bumblethorpe asked carefully. Chuck's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who'd found their absolute favorite topic in the entire universe. Protein is the building block of muscle tissue. It's essential for recovery, adaptation, and muscle protein synthesis. I've got whey protein, casein protein, plant-based protein, and even some experimental alien-friendly protein formulations I've been working on. The phrase alien-friendly protein formulations caused the rescue team's medical officer to immediately begin scanning for potentially hazardous biochemical compounds. Chuck's enthusiasm for sharing his protein knowledge was setting off every biological safety protocol in their database. "And you consume these protein formulations voluntarily?" Admiral Bumblethorpe asked. "Every single day," Chuck replied with obvious pride. "Sometimes twice a day. I've got a chocolate peanut butter banana spinach oats formulation that's absolutely incredible for post-workout recovery. Want to try some?" The rescue team's response to this offer was to immediately begin emergency evacuation procedures. They'd come prepared for diplomatic extraction, not biochemical warfare involving experimental nutritional compounds. The extraction process took considerably longer than anticipated, primarily because the three diplomat systems had achieved what their medical databases classified as voluntary shutdown for preservation purposes. Quilnox's tentacles had coiled into what his species called maximum defense configuration and showed no signs of voluntary uncoiling. Dr. Bumbleshare's energy construct had distributed across multiple dimensions to minimize molecular stress, and reassembling her required equipment that existed only in theoretical physics laboratories. Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems had locked into what his manufacturers called emergency preservation mode, and reactivating him required access codes that were stored in classified military databases. "This is totally normal," Chuck assured them, helping with the extraction process while providing what he called valuable educational information about human recovery protocols. "Everyone's a little stiff after their first serious workout. You guys did amazing. I can already see the adaptation beginning." The rescue team's medical officer, Dr. Whistlebottom Flurgeon, began conducting emergency evaluations while simultaneously trying to understand what had happened to her colleagues. Patient 1 shows signs of what humans call voluntary muscle exhaustion, she reported. Patient 2 appears to have achieved a quantum energy state that our databases don't recognize. Patient 3 has experienced what humans call getting absolutely jacked, but in ways that violate several mechanical engineering principles. "Getting absolutely jacked?" Admiral Bumblethorpe repeated the phrase with growing concern. "It's excellent jacked," Chuck clarified helpfully. "Not bad jacked. Their systems are adapting to new training stimuli. This is exactly what progressive overload is supposed to accomplish." The concept of excellent jacked versus bad jacked was immediately added to the growing list of human terminology that required urgent classification by the Galactic Council's Emergency Linguistics Department. As the rescue team worked to extract their colleagues, more humans began gathering to offer what they called helpful recovery advice. Apparently, seeing 3 alien beings in various states of exercise-induced system failure was considered a normal part of what humans called gym culture. "Tell them to foam roll," suggested a human female who appeared to be constructed entirely of functional muscle fiber and motivational energy. "They need to work on their mobility," added another human who was casually lifting what appeared to be a piece of construction equipment. "Did they get enough electrolytes?" asked a third human, who was somehow maintaining a conversation while running on a machine designed to simulate outdoor locomotion. The rescue team's attempts to explain that their colleagues were experiencing species-specific physiological preservation responses were met with increasingly detailed suggestions about proper stretching techniques, the importance of consistent training schedules, and something called periodization for optimal adaptation. "Look," Chuck said, approaching Admiral Bumblethorpe with the determined enthusiasm of someone who'd discovered a new training methodology. "Your friends just need to build up their base fitness level gradually. I could design a comprehensive interspecies training program. Maybe start with body weight movements, focus on mobility and stability, gradually introduce resistance training." "No!" The word came from all 3 rescued diplomats simultaneously, despite the fact that 2 of them were technically unconscious and one existed in a distributed energy state across multiple dimensions. It was the first time in recorded galactic history that 3 different species had achieved perfect vocal synchronization while experiencing complete system shutdown. Chuck interpreted this as overwhelming enthusiasm. "I know, right? It's exciting. We could revolutionize interspecies fitness. Think about the possibilities. Customized training programs for different physiologies, specialized equipment for tentacle-based exercise, energy construct resistance training protocols." Admiral Bumblethorpe realized that Chuck's enthusiasm for fitness was as unstoppable as a collapsing star and potentially more dangerous to galactic civilization. "Perhaps," he suggested with diplomatic desperation, "we should allow them to recover fully before making any additional training plans." "Recovery is crucial," Chuck agreed enthusiastically. "But active recovery is even better. I could design some gentle mobility routines, maybe some light stretching, basic breathing exercises." The mention of breathing exercises caused Captain Blorthak's mechanical systems to produce sounds that suggested several components were attempting to file formal complaints with their manufacturers. "I think," said Dr. Fumbleshire, her voice now emanating from 7 different dimensions simultaneously, "that we've learned everything we need to know about human recreational culture." Recreational? Chuck's expression suggested this was a fundamental misunderstanding of cosmic proportions. "This isn't recreation. This is lifestyle optimization. This is about unlocking genetic potential, maximizing physiological efficiency, and becoming the absolute best version of yourself through dedicated physical training." Admiral Bumblethorpe made several urgent notes in his official report. "Humans have weaponized self-improvement and convinced themselves it's recreational. They voluntarily subject themselves to physical stress levels that would constitute industrial accidents on most worlds. They consider this fun and actively seek opportunities to increase the difficulty, recommend immediate reclassification of human threat assessment and implementation of emergency protocols for any future cultural exchange programs." And the extraction process required an additional 4 hours, primarily because Chuck kept offering increasingly detailed explanations of proper recovery protocols, nutritional optimization strategies, and what he called periodization for sustainable long-term adaptation. By the time they finally escaped the gym, the facility's evening rush had begun, and even more humans were arriving to voluntarily participate in what the aliens could only describe as organized recreational suffering. "Will we see you tomorrow?" Chuck called out as they finally reached their extraction vehicle. "I've already started designing a progressive training program specifically for interspecies physiological adaptation. We could start with functional movement screening, establish baseline fitness levels, and gradually build toward advanced compound movements." The collective shudder that ran through the rescue team achieved what seismologists call measurable geological impact, a vibration so profound that it registered on Earth's earthquake detection systems. Back on their ship, the three diplomats underwent comprehensive medical evaluation that would later become the foundation for the Galactic Council's new Human Recreation Safety Protocols. Dr. Whistlebottom Flurgen's medical report revolutionized galactic understanding of human physiology and recreational behavior. Patient 1 has experienced what humans call delayed onset muscle soreness, she reported, a condition where biological systems acknowledge that they have been challenged beyond their usual operational parameters. Patient 2 has achieved what we're classifying as quantum exhaustion, an energy state that exists only in theoretical physics textbooks. Patient 3's mechanical systems have been upgraded, enhanced. His components now demonstrate flexibility characteristics that violate their original design specifications. The medical analysis revealed something that fundamentally challenged galactic understanding of intelligent species behavior. Humans had created an entire culture around voluntarily challenging their physical systems to stimulate improvement, and they considered this enjoyable. "Let me understand this correctly," Admiral Bumblethorpe said, reviewing the comprehensive medical and cultural analysis reports. "Humans deliberately stress their biological systems to enhance their capabilities." "Correct," confirmed Quilnox, his tentacles finally beginning to uncoil from their defensive configuration. "They voluntarily subject themselves to what other species would consider physical punishment." "Correct," flickered Dr. Fumbleshire, her energy construct slowly reassembling from its distributed dimensional state. "They've created specialized facilities equipped with devices designed specifically for this voluntary physical stress?" "Correct," mechanical-voiced Captain Blorthak, his system slowly emerging from emergency preservation mode. "And they consider this beneficial, enjoyable, desirable." "Correct," all three replied simultaneously, their voices carrying what could only be described as traumatic enlightenment. Admiral Bumblethorpe made his final report entry. "Humans have systematized voluntary physical challenge as a cultural norm. They have created technology specifically designed to facilitate controlled physical stress. They have developed nutritional sciences to optimize recovery from this voluntary stress. They have established social structures that encourage and support this behavior. Most disturbing of all, they actively seek to share this culture with other species." Classification updated. Humans are not just endurance predators. They are enthusiastic endurance predators with missionary zeal for converting other species to their voluntary physical challenge lifestyle. The official incident report sent to the Galactic Council resulted in the immediate establishment of several new departments. The Bureau of Human Recreational Safety, the Department of Voluntary Physical Challenge Studies, and the Emergency Response Division for Fitness-Related Cultural Encounters. Humanity's classification was updated to potentially hazardous endurance predators with evangelical fitness tendencies and dangerous levels of optimism regarding universal physical improvement. But the real lasting impact of what became known as the Iron Paradise incident became apparent 6 weeks later when Chuck received an official communication from the Galactic Council requesting detailed information about establishing human-style physical optimization facilities on 47 different worlds throughout the galaxy. Dear human Chuck Thunderpex, the message read, after extensive analysis of your training methodologies and their effects on our diplomatic personnel, we have concluded that voluntary physical enhancement could provide significant benefits to galactic civilization. Our initial resistance to your approaches was based on fundamental misunderstanding of human recreational culture. We formally request comprehensive consultation services for establishing similar facilities throughout our territories, along with qualified personnel to implement proper training protocols and nutritional guidance. Chuck's response was immediate, enthusiastic, and exactly what the galaxy should have expected. Absolutely incredible. This is the opportunity I've been waiting for my entire fitness career. I'll put together the most comprehensive interspecies training program the universe has ever seen. We'll start with fundamental movement screening for different physiologies, establish species-specific baseline fitness assessments, develop customized equipment for various body types, create nutritional protocols for different metabolisms, and gradually build toward advanced functional fitness integration. This is going to be revolutionary. The galaxy is about to discover what it means to unlock their true potential. 6 months later, the first Galactic Fitness Convention was held on Earth, attended by representatives from over 200 species, all eager to learn what humans called the secrets of voluntary physical optimization. Chuck was appointed as the Director of Interspecies Fitness Development, a position he approached with the same enthusiasm he'd brought to training 3 confused aliens. The convention's opening ceremony featured Chuck delivering what became known as the speech that changed the galaxy. Welcome, everyone, to the beginning of Universal Fitness Revolution. Today, we're not just sharing exercise techniques. We're sharing the human philosophy that every being, regardless of species, physiology, or evolutionary background, has the potential to become stronger, faster, and more capable than they ever imagined. We're going to prove that voluntary challenge leads to involuntary awesomeness. Dr. Fumbleshire, who had somehow become Chuck's unofficial spokesperson for the energy being community, later described the moment. That's when we realized we hadn't been rescued from a human gym. We'd been recruited into the galactic fitness revolution. The universe would never be quite the same. But then again, Chuck had always said that transformation was the whole point.